Hello, everyone, and welcome to CodeCast by STL Tech Talk, where we will be giving you instructional, informative, unique, and insightful commentary on programming, code, and technology. From robots to roadhouses, we will be bringing you the content you want and need. My name is JJ Hammond, and I am joined by two coding experts tonight. Up first, he has been developing software for over 20 years, beginning with the IBM refrigerator-sized Series 1 computer, to Clipper DBase, Foxbase, Visual Fox Pro, and Visual Basic, then to .NET. Today, he focuses on ASP.NET development and is having more fun than ever solving business problems for clients. A practice director for custom application development at Nudesic, a Microsoft Gold partner, and the trusted technology partner in business innovation, a 9-time recipient of Microsoft's Most Valuable Professional Award, also a current ASP.NET MVP, an ASP Insider, and is the Ineta Mentor for Pennsylvania and West Virginia, author of several books, and is frequent contributor to Code Magazine and DevPro Magazine. He holds a BS in Business Administration from Mansfield University, an MBA in Information Systems from St. Joseph's University, and a JD from Rutgers School of Law. The incredible John Peterson. Say hello, John.
Hello, John. It's good to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, and thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you taking out the time, and we cannot wait to have your insight on this particular and unique episode of CodeCast. And I got to say, I'm happy to be back on the show because it's been too long since I've been participating. However, this show would not be possible without King of the Hill in Minnesota striving to distribute development knowledge to the masses and has spent the last 20 years architecting, wow, you guys are like ancient, and implementing highly scalable ASP.NET applications throughout the Twin Cities. The world is a better place with him in it, period. Say hello, Gus Emery.
Hello, everyone. John, I haven't seen you in a few days.
It's been a few days since Kansas City. Yep. Yeah, this is getting to be a really good habit. I'm digging it.
Yeah, me too.
Nice.
Me too.
Nice. And again, guys, thank you both for being on. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, #CodeCast, Facebook /STL Tech Talk, Google+, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Windows Phone, TuneIn Radio, or listen directly from our site. Visit STLTechTalk.com to keep up on our tech news, podcasts, CodeCast, find out how you can advertise with us or hire us to consult you on your technological needs. And don't forget you can interact with the show by sending us feedback to podcast@stltechtalk.com. And if you're watching us live, you can ask us questions via the chat room, and we will do our best to answer those questions. So without further ado, let's kick off the show with the first question to John. How did you get into technology?
So it was really by accident. I was basically working as a staff accountant for a bank in Philadelphia, and basically being one of the newer people out of college, they had an affinity for Lotus 1-2-3 macros. I'm really going to begin to date myself. So they're like, well, you know what? You understand how this stuff works, and no one knows really how to program this stuff, so why don't you take a whack at it? So I did that, and I kind of enjoyed it, and then I left the bank, and then went to another company, and basically we were moving from that IBM Series 1 computer to a new computer, and they basically needed some, basically what amounted to Clipper programs that transfer data from one format to another, and I basically got into it by default, and then one thing led to another, and I realized, well, this is a lot more fun than accounting. So that was kind of it, and that was going back to about 1990 or so. So it's been a while.
Absolutely. So that's really interesting. You know, the most experienced people that I talk to, they always get in on the ground floor. They get in on, you know, coming from the very first VBs, you know, from the very first computing systems, understanding the architecture and how that works, and just never really losing that bug, you know, that attachment to being able to create things using computers and seeing how it evolved and being a part of that change. So that's kind of a recurring theme that I found with most professionals in this field. So it's exciting to hear that, obviously I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to, the different versions and all the different best practices and things of that nature when moving from system to system.
Yeah, if you want to talk about Fox Pro, now let's not talk about Fox Pro. That should just stay in the past where it is. But for me, really getting into the community, the person that I really have to thank for really kind of getting me into the community, it goes back to about 1990. I want to say 1994 in Toronto, 1993 or 1994, and I met this guy. Giving a talk. His name's Rod Paddock, and Rod gave this really cool talk. Of course, I can't remember what the talk was, but I know it was really cool. And I went up to him and said, "Hey, you talk in a real commonsensical way, and I'd love to talk to you about what you do in technology. I'm relatively new into in going to conferences and things like that." And so we just started chatting, and then I had expressed an interest in writing, and so one thing led to another. He's like, "Yeah, I'm working on this Fox Pro book, and are you interested in writing a chapter?" And I said, "Sure." So I wrote a chapter. He goes, "Well, you did that pretty quick. Maybe you were interested in writing another chapter." And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Well, what about a third one?" And finally I said, "You know what? The heck with it. Do you want to just be on the book with us? Because we got to finish this." And we're best friends today. And the one story that I like to say about Rod, after he got me involved in Code Magazine and everything else, is when he told me he was getting married, he asked me to be his best man, but his wedding originally was for like the middle of July. In 2004, and I said, "Dude, I'm going to be studying for the bar exam. I love you, but I can't break away to go to Hawaii." He's like, "That's okay. When is the bar exam done?" I said, "I'll be done like around July 29th." He's like, "Fine, we'll put the wedding off until you're done, but your ass is getting out to Maui, and you're standing there with me when I get married." And I love the guy, and so, but he's the reason why I really have been able to achieve whatever it is that I've been able to achieve in this thing we call community.
Man, that is some committed bromance. That is some committed bromance.
I'll accept that bromance. That's fine.
For sure. No, I'm not using that derogatory. I'm just saying.
Okay, it all works.
No, I mean, a lot of the people who got me into technology, I look up to, I think, is not only peers and good friends, but those relationships you develop are phenomenal. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit. Some of the relationships that Kevin and I, and even Gus, we met Gus at a CodeCast, at a coding conference. So I mean, it's not one of those things to take lightly, for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Not to interject, but one of my talks at KCDC that John was supposed to do, but he had to go have a birthday party with his wife, which is perfectly okay. It's understandable. It's one of the few, if only, excuses I'll ever take. However, I was talking about this whole networking piece and how networking is important, and going through that. And one of our past guests, Mike Benkovich, walks in the back door, and I said, "By the way, since I'm on this topic, Mike, this is a perfect time that you walked in, because audience, I've known this person for over 20 years. I worked with them at my first tech job. Now he's here speaking with me, and we're doing this thing together. And look at how big this whole family is." So it's funny that you say that, because everything comes back to, if you're at a place and you make that connection, hopefully it lasts forever, right? Or at least as long as you can, and it'll help you no matter what you do.
So, I just to kind of talk a little bit more about the history and where you're coming from. One of the more interesting things to me was the fact that you have a wealth of, you have a lot of knowledge in kind of different areas, but it seems like the .NET frame that kind of established your current trajectory.
Right.
Tell me a little bit why that was so big to you and why you felt that was so important back then.
in terms of the .NET framework, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by your bio, obviously talking with you and everything, you could do pretty much whatever you wanted. I mean, if you wanted to, go off on, different adventures, it could have been anything, and you chose to go with the ASP.NET. So, what was your particular pull to that framework?
So I'm holding here. If you can see that.
Visual Studio.NET. Nice.
Right. This is codenamed. It's the final beta of .NET. Oh, this is Everett, 2002. Still sealed. A batch that I still had. These have never been opened. These are the original CDs for the first version of .NET. And this is the final beta, November 2002. So this is what 11 and a half years ago. Kept these with me because I go back to 1993 Orlando FoxPro DevCon. The one of the heads of the programming division at Microsoft at the time, I think is what they called it, Roger Heinen, talked about this thing of unified programming strategy. So this is damn near 10 years before those CDs ever saw the light of day. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, right? That we could go from this monolithic thing to we could go this language-independent thing, this idea that we wouldn't be bounded by a specific language, that you could pick a language, that you could invent a language, and there would be this magical runtime in the middle and everything. I thought it was really interesting to see where the mind of at least one senior executive at Microsoft was going, and it just intrigued the heck out of me.
Right.
Now that reality still took about 10 years just to get to the first step, and then here we are where some may say finally .NET is kind of where it's at a maturity level where it's like, wow, after 10 years or so it's really shaken out and we can really depend on it. And of course the deal is that if you're in an ASP side of things, you were now Project K, and it's already Owen and the next new thing. But what I still remember is going back to like 1997. I think we were at may have been in Palm Springs or whatever, and you guys may know Rick Strahl. Rick Strahl was a FoxPro MVP back in the day, and he's back in the MVP ranks as an ASP.NET MVP. And here's this guy showing how to do web applications with just pure CGI. At the time was this new thing called Westwind Web Connection. How we can run FoxPro in the browser, and all this stuff is kind of that. So that's like 4 years after this unified language strategy thing was being talked about. And I guess the thing that I would say is the cool thing is how much stuff changes, how important your networking is, and creating relationships. And you almost have to have like a buddy system, right? It's like you got to get with a good group of people and community that you're like in this together, and you're going to start going on this adventure. An old friend said, you know what, if you wanted a career that wasn't going to change, then you dig holes. But if you like constant change and always pushing the edge of the envelope, our business is a pretty good business to be in. And I guess that's part of what we'll end up talking about later on with conferences and codes of conduct and what community is all about, at least from this one developer's and professional standpoint, what it means to me.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to get that background a little bit because I found it interesting to see where a person such as yourself, why you gravitated towards that.
JJ, you can call me a seasoned professional, which is a euphemism for old. It's okay. I actually wear it as a badge of honor. See this gray hair here? It's there.
I gotta say, I guess my communication skills are a little worn out. I got like I think altogether 8 job offers last week. So
hey, congratulations.
Thanks. But I guess my point is that's not what I was going for. I'm saying that you're an extremely intelligent individual, and you could have chose anything, but you decided to choose this thing, and that's what intrigued me.
Well, I did try one career change in going to law school. And
Yep.
We'll talk about how difficult that transition was and why I'm kind of back in technology. But yeah, I hear you, man.
Okay, right on. Well, Gus, you're up with your question.
Perfect. So, John, what drives you day-to-day technology-wise? What do you like to get up and do?
Right now, it's the big thing that I'm getting into deep right now is a lot of the mobility technology and specifically Xamarin. And I'm diving head first and really having a lot of fun in that environment where I'm able to take, and I know this is going to sound like a commercial for Xamarin. It's not supposed to sound that way, but the idea that I could take my skills as a .NET developer, C#, understanding that framework, that language syntax, and be able to leverage that and to build apps for, these things, these iPhones and Android devices and Windows phones.
Well,
and I love that.
I hate to interrupt, but I mean, me and a buddy from school are actually doing a project right now was using C# and Xamarin to deploy that out because, I mean, like you just said, I mean, having that ability is just a really fun, it's a fun project to be a part of, just to see where it goes.
Yeah, and so it's like as I get older, it's like, I mean, all cards on the table. This is my 50. I turned 50, in September this year, and it's like, I still like learning new stuff, but what I really want to do is rely on first principles, good architectural principles, good design practices, and I just love being able to take all that good stuff and realizing that it applies as much today as it ever has. As a vehicle to learning new things. But what I'm really, I mean, the thing that really I love I say the young folks in this business. I guess I sound kind of patronizing when I say that, but I'll call the one guy out. Anthony Vanderhorn, who was one of the with Nick Molinar doing Glimpse, and we're having dinner one night. We're at the Dallas Tech Fest, and we're sitting. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm 29." Like, you're 29. It's like, holy smokes, I've got fillings older than you. But it's like it was so cool it's like man, if I were doing the stuff that he was doing, he and Nick are doing it, at these young age, what I think are young ages, you can't help but be. It's like, so I'm a jazz musician. I play drums.
Nice.
And one of my heroes is a guy, Art Blakey, of the Jazz Messengers, and he always recycled the guys in his band. But the thing was, he kept getting older, but the ages of the players kept staying the same. He's like, yeah, I hang out with young cats because young cats keep you young. Sure. And I'm kind of getting what he's saying. So yeah, it's a lot. I'm having more fun today than ever. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So John, here's a question for you. So you've been really outspoken, or at least you have been with me and a few others about codes of conduct.
Yes.
Why?
So it probably requires me stepping back a little bit and say, well, how in the world is this a topic that resonates with me, or how did I even get involved in it, of all places like Twitter, which, if you're really trying to have a meaningful conversation, Twitter is probably the last place that you'd ever want to have try to have a meaningful conversation.
It's hard to have a conversation at 160 characters, right?
140.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah, 140. It's like, it's impossible, right? It's totally impossible. So mutual friend of ours has a conference, kind of getting bullied a little bit on why not having a code of conduct and how that show is bad because it doesn't have a code of conduct. Meanwhile, there's never been a negative incident at this show, and this show happens to be one of the types of conferences that are actually themselves a living, breathing code of conduct, if you will. And I thought that was I don't want to say injustice, but I thought it was terribly unfortunate. It was unfortunate because, well, it's like anybody, right? You're getting ganged up on, you're getting bullied, and the deal is, it's like, what are you going to stand up for? So I decided to kind of take a vocal stance on this, especially when I saw these codes of conduct that were being trotted out there. So I look at them first and foremost as legal documents. They are. They're meant to be advanced as, well, this is a legal document, and this is a contractual obligation, and if you go to a conference, there has to be teeth in it. Well, I started looking at the codes of conduct that are out there being paraded as model codes of conduct. They sucked. They sucked from a drafting standpoint. They really were void for vagueness. As an attorney, I would have no problems within 10 minutes basically getting the thing bounced in a courtroom if someone were to hold my client to that standard. And I thought they were just awful. And then I started getting pulled into some rather unfortunate Twitter conversations, if you will, where eventually I was just getting attacked. And, that's how I kind of got involved with the whole thing. But I look at it from a standpoint of, okay, let's separate out for a moment things like gender and lack of gender equality or whatever in the tech business. Listen, I've been married for 24 years. My wife is a senior vice president with a bank. She's worked for the same institution or various institutions that have been acquired for 30 years. I know firsthand the nonsense that she has had to deal with in corporate America. So when we talk about bad things happening, it's beyond just the technical world. So I kind of want to separate that out and instead sort of like focus a conversation on, let's look at codes of conduct from the standpoint of, these are legal documents. These are things that people want other people held to, organizations to enforce, and for conferences, aka businesses, right? They're businesses,
sure,
to abide by. So that's a somewhat, I will say, sterile environment. Trying to keep some of the hyperbole and some of the passionate rhetoric, if you will, kind of out of it, and let's look at these things and try to construct something and have it in a positive manner. And I actually built kind of a model code of conduct, but in a very long-winded way. That's how I got involved in this. That's why it's important to me, because if we're not careful, we're going to end up in a very bad place, and I think we're going to end up driving some conferences kind of off the landscape, when in reality, I think the idea behind some of this advocacy, it's very noble. I think it's very, very well intentioned, but I believe some of the angst is a bit misdirected, and I believe that at least what I'm trying to do is to help be part of the solution, not part of the problem, but I think I can do that through some positive contributions. But we also need the other side of the argument to be a little more accepting, perhaps this whole goal of diversity, be more inclusive about it, to have a joint conversation in this whole thing, to find out how the community as a whole can make this a better landscape and more welcoming for folks that feel like conferences aren't their thing, and all the benefits that we talked about, networking and advantages and things like that, can accrue to everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of religion, regardless of race, whatever your background happens to be.
Sure. So for our normal CodeCast audience, we usually do a sample code where we do a demonstration of some kind. But tonight, I just wanted to kind of drill down to some of the because there are people in universities that watch the show and try to learn and stuff like that, and maybe haven't been to a conference yet or any of that kind of stuff. So just to kind of break it down a little bit, what we're talking about tonight are the codes of conduct that everybody has to conduct themselves with when going to a conference. Some of the younger crowds know can maybe look up some of the game dev conferences and maybe see what that looks like. But that's a good kind of barometer to just to take a quick look and see what that's like. But conferences are like businesses. The speakers go in, they get paid. There's a lot of networking that goes on, but they're speaking to a crowd of people, and they want to make sure that crowd, that customer base, if you will, is properly taken care of, and that's what we're really discussing tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to make sure our audience knew that before we went any further. So go ahead, Gus.
No, I was going to say it's the exact same thing that you would get walking into a movie theater, right? You're in a movie theater with 200 people watching X-Men or whatever, and you want them to all follow a code of conduct, right? You want the cell phones away, on vibrate or off. You don't want them to talk during it. Hopefully they're not throwing popcorn at you or pouring drinks at you. I mean, that's the feeling that everyone wants. They want to be able to go in there and know that everyone's going to do the exact same thing. That is where I think John's point was, where everyone needs to feel included and safe and okay to go to that location, right, John?
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, it's, first off, I break it down to business. It's just the idea that a conference would somehow want to perpetuate the notion that it's an unsafe place to be, or anything like that. Well, that's a bad. Let's set aside the human decency side of this for a moment. Let's set that aside for a moment. That's just bad business. That's bad business. Let alone the fact that it's just like, well, you know what? People should treat other people with as a good mutual friend of ours, coined the phrase mutual respect. And if he happens to put out, if he's watching tonight and he puts it out that I can mention his name, that's fine. I'll be more than happy to do it because I'd love to give him credit for it. But this culture of respect, culture of mutual respect, extremely important. And it sounds like a catchy phrase or whatever, but there's a good book. It's called Codes and Other Laws of Cyberspace, and it's actually written by Professor Lawrence Lessig. At the time, Professor Lessig was one of the professors at Harvard Business School. He's now and he founded the Berkman Center at Harvard. He's now at Stanford. But this idea, think about eBay. You buy or sell on eBay. What's important to you? Your reputation score, right? And if you buy something, you definitely want to make sure you pay on time. If you sell something, this happened to me. I sold something on eBay. Somewhere along the way, by the way, probably totally my fault, the way I packed something, I did something wrong or whatever, and it got damaged in shipping. Now, the guy took pictures of it. It was totally fine the way we worked it out. I definitely had an incentive of where, like, well, I don't want my reputation score to go down. I want to be known as somebody who is trustworthy, that you could depend on. At the same time, we worked it out where there was a bit of a make good or whatever, and I refunded part of his money, and it all worked out. But when we talk about codes, there's the legal codes, statutes, these are public codes and things like that, or there is the code that we write in cyberspace, but there's also the other. I think what Professor Lessig was trying to get to in terms of this communities as a whole and how we interact with one another, that there is this code. And to a large degree, while much of it actually is codified, listen, I'm an attorney. I don't read half that stuff. It's like I don't read it. I say, click, yeah, I agree, and I move on. So it just sort of sits out there in the ether. So there's a lot of this code that we don't read, but nevertheless, in our gut, in our heart, in the way we interact, we know for the most part what the right thing to do is. And typically, this may surprise some folks that know me well. It's like I do impute the best motives to people. I actually do, until proven otherwise. And I believe it's been my experience that there's a lot of fellowship, community, collegiality to the conferences that I go to, and I'll rattle them off right now. I go to CodeStock, I go to DevLink, I go to stlouisdata.net. And these are conferences that I speak at. Kansas City Developers Conference, which is a new one, which I think was fantastic. VS Live, Dev Connections, New York City Code Camp. Some of these have codes of conduct, some of them don't, but they all offer a great experience because of the people that are involved.
Right.
And the community.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Non-hostile.
Yeah.
Non-hostile.
Exactly. So, John, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Let's step back to something that you said earlier. The fact that some of these documents were not possibly not drawn up by lawyers anyway. We'll just put it that way. What, how do you feel about that? What do you think conferences should do?
So, and I typically give a talk, typically Code Stock, although it's trying to think where else this is going to be this year. But I do give I give a legal talk on just everyday things that developers and independent consultants should know. By the way, I'll give a plug to my other fellow counselor, Jeffrey Strauss, out of St. Louis, who's one of the organizers of St. Louis Days.net. He gives a lot of great talks, legal talks, open source, and also things that independent developers should know at the expense of being somewhat self-interested in that. It's good business advice. Sure. I believe it was Danny DeVito in War of the Roses that said, when a lawyer wants to tell you something for free, you should listen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anytime you're looking at a document and you want a document to be legally binding or to be enforceable, the one thing that there's a basic principle in the law that says that contracts and documents are construed against the drafter. You wrote it. You must have known what the heck it was you were trying to say. So one of the problems that I see with a lot of these codes of conduct, and a couple that I'll pull out specifically in references like PyCon 2014, they forked their, this is actually open source, they forked their code of conduct from the ADA initiative's model code of conduct, which is on the Geek Feminism Wiki. Okay. The problem with these codes of conduct are that they use inconsistent, undefined terms. 1 minute they're talking about attendees. The next minute they're talking about participants. Some words are capitalized. Other words are not. And the thing is, you quickly start to lose track of, A, what conduct is supposed to be covered. Also, who is actually covered under this code? And there's another principle in the law that basically says that a contract can be void for vagueness. So if you come to me, or if I'm alleged to be somebody who is violating something under a code of conduct at a conference, well, it's true. It's a private event. Due process technically doesn't apply unless we're in a court of law. Sure. But still, I think fundamental principles of equity and fairness should apply. And just because somebody says that something happened, it doesn't mean that it actually did. But at the same time, if somebody says that something happened, there should be a safe harbor for that person to be able to go where they can go and be heard. That's fair.
Totally.
Yeah. Right. And so none of those do. That's as much for the benefit, by the way, as which I would say is the victim. It's as much benefit for them as it is for the alleged perpetrator, because if it is, and oftentimes many of these things are technically criminal matters where the police should be involved. Most people at conferences actually aren't trained to actually take in that kind of information, whether we like to or not. We're not trained counselors. You got to be very, very careful about the leading questions that you may ask. And if there is a bad person, a bad actor amongst us at a conference, the last thing you want to do is foul up an investigation that ultimately could land with the police and a local prosecutor, district attorney, or whatever. Because if something did bad happen, you know what? You guys, you, Kevin, as much as anybody, it's like get the bad get the bad actors out, punish them, make an example of them, and if you got to put their head on a pike in the middle of the town square to make an example of them, go for it. Burn them at the stake, whatever it is. If they're truly bad actors, and say that this is not something that we really tolerate in our community. But to get figuratively, to get there, you've got to have a document that's workable. It's got to be well drafted. And in my legal opinion, I see a lot of the documents out there not to be of sufficient quality to actually be enforceable.
So technically, they're almost just there for show, right? Sure. Just to be there.
Yeah, I think it's almost gotten to a point now where it's become a box checking exercise. Like, okay, I've got my code of conduct, and that's it. Now, I will say, with all, I will highlight there are three elements. There are three elements of, and I actually think these are three really good elements from the ADA initiative. I think I'm properly citing. I'm citing the proper resource here. The ADA initiative in terms of code of conduct. There are three basic elements that a code of conduct should have. Descriptions of common but unacceptable behavior. That's number one. Number two, reporting instructions with contact information. And number three, information about enforcement. Those are your three basic things that you're looking for in a code of conduct. Now, there's a lot more that has to go into these things. But, if you have those three things and then some structure around it where if you're really going to do this, and you're really going to have something that you're looking at to be enforceable, to have teeth, then damn it, then let's have that conversation. Let's have something that actually has some real teeth in there, and let's cover everybody. So here's the thing. Check this out. In the model code of conduct, I'm going to read a passage here for you guys. And by the way, I'm sure we'll post links.
Yeah, definitely.
So everyone can verify the Reagan rule: trust but verify. This is an interesting one where we talk about. Let's see here.
Well, while you're looking at that, I did look up ADA, and I did look up some information, and it's kind of interesting because I'm not going to pick on any particular developer conference. I'm just going to say I went to one particular developer conference, and I'm looking at their code of conduct page, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 paragraphs.
Right.
So I'm not sure there's a whole lot that could be. That's not vague, like you were saying earlier. That it's just, can be covered within 4 paragraphs. I mean, I'm sure that there's some wiggle room there, and I think what you're getting at is as long as you're specific, and as long as you keep the same language, the same verbiage, and put it through the scrutiny test, where if you play the good guy and the bad guy, because you need to do that sometimes. Like later in this show, I'm going to ask you maybe like some questions back and forth, and you can tell me what it's going to be like. But you kind of want to play both sides, like just some weird off scenario, and how do we deal with this? And does our code of conduct properly handle that situation that we've been presented with?
Right. So here's a question: am I able to share my screen at all?
Yes.
Okay, so
you hover over my face with the pointer, and then you go over to the left-hand side of your screen, and then you drop down to the second button there, and it says Screen Share.
Oh, Screen Share. Okay, so instead of me, actually, there we go. We'll do that.
Yep. Instead of our audience trying to read through your the reflection on your glasses.
Yeah, exact. Oh, is that
there we go.
Okay, so you can see this, right? This is the. So let's take a walk through this here. So this is it's kind of cool. They have the medium version and they have the long public version. So let's go through. Well, let me do this. Let's go to PyCon first. Okay, so this is PyCon. This is 2014. They just had this conference, and of course, PyCon had a very notable incident last year where two guys, by the way, we still don't know exactly what they said, but two guys were saying something about dongles and forking repositories, supposedly, They got their picture taken. They got put up on Twitter. In my opinion, all cards on the table. They had a reasonable expectation of privacy. We still don't know exactly what they said, and for goodness sake, GitHub for a while had T-shirts they were selling that said "Fork You" or something like that. So I mean, there's all kinds of that stuff that goes on, and yet here we are. It's like, really? I mean, okay. I mean, if it's offensive to somebody, I kind of get it, but do we really make a federal case out of it? And at the end of the day, do we still know what was said? No, we don't. So, so with that in mind, let's read some things here. PyCon is dedicated to providing a harassment-free conference experience for everyone. I don't know who everyone happens to be, by the way. That's not a legally cognizable term. Regardless of gender, sexual orientation, this is all fine. I don't know who we actually is, but we do not tolerate harassment, which, by the way, you see how harassment is a lowercase h?
Sure.
See how it's lowercase? That means it's not a defined term. So we don't really know what harassment actually is here, right?
Right.
Okay. We do not tolerate harassment of conference participants. Notice that this is lowercase. We don't know what a participant actually is here. Is it an attendee? Is it the spouse of an attendee? Is it an exhibitor, a sponsor, a spouse of somebody? Is it who exactly is a quote-unquote participant? Now, notice here you get to the longer version, and all of a sudden you're going to start to see different words. All of a sudden you're going to start to see the word attendee arise. You'll definitely see that over here, and so the issue is, oh, I just need to stop my sharing here. Let's see here.
Done.
Oh, it's done?
Yeah.
Okay. So what'll happen with some of these documents is 1 minute it says participant. The next minute it'll be like participant. And so in a moment I'm going to show you a code of conduct that I wrote and show you what legal drafting is. And why it's done a certain way. And the interesting thing is that if you actually follow a lot of design principles in software engineering, it's actually the key to a good legal document. And these are the things that we should be looking for. So as soon as you have inconsistent terms or whatever, you're going to have an issue. So let's go to my code of conduct that I wrote. I'm going to share my screen in a second, and I'm going to take you through it. So let me do that. Hover over JJ's face here.
Let's simmer down on the hovering over my face thing, because we can probably turn that into not good things.
We're going to do the screen share, and tell me when you see my document here.
I can see it.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I'll send this to you guys so it's available to you. I've done some bolding here just to show the defined terms. Okay, so the first question is, who is covered? So we're going to read through this, and by the way, for folks, this little exercise that we're going through, this applies to whenever you're reading, if you're an independent contractor and you're reading a contracting independent contractor agreement or a non-disclosure agreement or anything that you're asked to sign. You can take these exact same principles that I'm going to show you here and apply it to any legal document that you're asked to sign. And this will be some things that you can do to scrutinize documents that you're asked to sign.
Yeah,
so,
because this may not seem like a sexy issue, but I got to say I've worked with 2 different real estate companies and worked for a real estate lawyer drafting code of conduct papers for their small business. So this is very, very important to a lot of fields.
So here we are. So let's go right through it. So anyone affiliated with this conference in capital C, so the conference will basically, we do rely on the fact that this document is going to be in the context of something that's a conference. You can call it an event or whatever, but here's what I want you to take note of. Anyone affiliated with this conference, and then in parentheses I put the participant. From that point on, I don't refer to you as an attendee. I don't refer to you as an exhibitor. I don't refer to you as anything but the participant, capital P. In other words, I've declared a variable here, and that variable is called participant. It is immutable, so it's a constant. It's actually a constant. It's immutable, and it's going to be one thing. Let's continue on. Is expected to conduct themselves in a civil manner and treat any other participant, notice capital P, right? With mutual respect and consideration. Now listen. At some point, we have to rely on the law of common sense, right? It is true. The courts will take judicial notice of common things. But I don't just leave it there. Now, notice I have another paren here. The standard of conduct. I don't call, this is bad, right? I call it code of conduct in the name of the PDF here, but I actually like to refer to this as a standard of conduct. Maybe that's semantics, I don't know. But basically what we're saying is, if you're involved or affiliated with this conference in a certain way, and by the way, I define certain things later on, with this conference, you're a participant. And as a participant, you have to treat other participants with mutual respect and consideration. Now, this is important. Participant, for the purposes of this standard of conduct, notice how I'm bringing together two defined terms. Shall include, but is not limited to, conference attendees, sponsors, staff, and any guests, associates, and anyone else affiliated with the aforementioned groups. Now I ask you, can you think of anybody that wouldn't be included in that sentence?
Not right off the top of my head.
Right, didn't take a lot of words, did it? In other words, I basically stick to my defined terms. It's somewhat self-referencing, but basically here are the keys. But is not limited to. Here's the key, is that it's like one of the mistakes that codes of conduct make is that they try to enumerate all these specific things that are harassing behavior. The problem with that is it becomes a bit of a, well, let's talk, I want to rely on an abstraction here, right? The abstraction is the general sense of good conduct. Now, I'm only through the first paragraph here. I want to rely on an abstraction. An abstraction and the laws around us can change. I don't want to have to change this document. Listen, guys, I'm getting old. I'm getting lazy. I don't want to have to keep changing this document. So right off the bat, I've included anybody that is either directly or indirectly affiliated with this conference, and oh, by the way, as you will find out, it will be at the discretion of the conference. Now the next piece, okay. What is covered? Thus, again, sticking with defined terms. The standard of conduct is defined. So, in other words, I've outlined generally up here what the standard of conduct is. Now I'm adding some color to it. Who am I talking to here? I'm talking to the judge. I'm talking to any judicial body, anybody who ultimately could provide remedy to somebody. The other codes of conduct don't really do that because they're ambiguous. They provide no context, no roadmap of decision making for people that ultimately would have to interpret this document.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Not to interrupt, but we've got a question from our first ever guest, Miguel Castro. He says, yes. Does it include venue employees as well?
It does.
Okay.
It does. And here's the reason why it includes venue employees. Because venue employees are covered as a matter of a public accommodation. And you're going to find out real quick how they're covered, but I do mention the venue here. And you'll see that in a moment, but they are covered. And it's basically under the doctrine of respondeat superior or agent. They're an agent for their employer. And the employer, through the contract that most of these conferences sign with the venues, there's mutuality there. So through those other agreements, they are absolutely covered, but they would be covered regardless of whether this group conference existed or not. So now we get to what is covered. The standard of conduct is defined by what is deemed to be generally accepted by the conference, again, defined term, the venue. The venue's own standards of conduct, rules and regulations, then semicolon. So I got the comma there that applies to the venue, and any legal authority of which the venue or participant is subject. So I had a conversation today with a mutual friend, and so let's say that your conference is in state X, but this alleged perpetrator is from state Y. Well, by the letter of the law, you're only really bound by state X, where the municipality or the municipality where the conference is. But what if the state in which the participant came from had a stricter harassment law? Because when your legal standing as a attendee at a conference is that of a licensee, this is a contract. You are bound by the terms and conditions of this license, this contract, which is revocable at any time. So therefore, what I just did with my code of conduct, standard of conduct, whatever you want to call it, is I brought in the law from the more strict jurisdiction, if you will. I've given the court the freedom, because of these words on a legal document, say they can bring in. It's known as conflict of laws, and in multiple jurisdictional litigation. These things do matter. If you're in the state of Kentucky, and if West Virginia could apply because the contract says so, then the state of Kentucky will enforce and bring in the laws of the state of West Virginia. We do this through private contract all the time. Anyway, continuing on. In addition, and this is very, very important, because one of the criticisms of my standard here was that, well, you're still a little vague, John. You're talking like a lawyer. Well, okay, I can't help that, but I added this sentence not too long ago. I added this sentence not too long ago. In addition, any other conduct by a participant that another participant, notice that mutuality there?
Sure.
We're confining where this goes. If the participant believes is prohibited under this, again, standard of conduct, shall be covered as well. In other words, that whole notion I was saying, you know what, I can't possibly cover everything within the four corners of this document. Now, people that know me very well know that maybe at times I like to talk, and perhaps I can be a little bit long-winded, but I will tell you that when I draft legal documents, I actually err on the side of brevity. I, above all, know words get you in trouble, and the more words you use, the more trouble you're likely to get in. Brevity works in legal documents. So here's the deal.
As long as it's specific.
Right, and it's like, look, if you're a participant and you believe in your mind, because I can't read your mind. We can't read your mind as conference givers. You know what? Then there's a safe harbor for you to come to. But that's not to mean that it's a free-for-all, because notice the larger context here. How is this enforced? And this is the part that a lot of people have problems with, because I do believe, again, I've got to give protection to the conference givers, their businesses. There are some lawyers out there that would like to basically make conference attendees de facto employees of a conference. And that's a big deal for harassment law, because we have a wide array of law around harassment in the workplace. And the deal is that if you actually made conferences responsible for attendees as if they were employees, you would shut just about every conference down. Nobody's going to sign up for that kind of liability. So here's what I say. Only timely and directly reported violations of this standard of conduct with sufficient factual details of the violation to the conference. So you can't be tweeting it. You can't be going out all over the place. You got to take it to the conference. Granted, it's up to the conference to provide the place where people can go. Upon investigation, if warranted, may result, may, not shall, may result in sanctions, including, again, but not limited to, expulsion of the offending party or parties without recourse. They don't get a refund. Now, sanctions imposed under this standard of conduct shall be adjudicated and determined in the sole discretion of the conference. That sentence sits apart. You must give latitude to conferences.
Mm-hmm.
They must be afforded the opportunity to run the business. You get notice. If this doesn't really fit within what you think a code of conduct should be, well, then you can vote with your wallet and not attend or speak at the conference. Now, this is also important. Nothing in this standard of conduct implies, nor should be interpreted to interfere with or discourage a participant's right to contact the venue. And by the way, let's be really clear here, folks. Most of these places are at a hotel. The conference is not the primary body that's responsible for your health, safety, and welfare. The venue is. The hotel is. That's a non-delegable duty of a hotel or any conference facility because they're a public accommodation. They are responsible ultimately responsible. A conference is certainly there to help and to facilitate, but legally, there are contracts that conferences sign. And by the way, there are reasonable expectations of conferences on the part of venue. They have security, they have cameras, they have infrastructure. Ultimately, the venue is going to be brought into any legal proceeding for investigative purposes. They are actually the primary responsible party for making sure that your health, safety, and welfare are taken care of. And finally, law enforcement, they're really ultimately going to be, if you contact them, well, you should be encouraged to contact them directly. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not contact the conference. Don't contact the venue. Contact law enforcement directly. But you know what? What's very important, and I think I'm broadcasting again. Am I broadcasting again? Hold on. Am I?
Almost.
Let's see here.
Almost.
There we go. You've got to make, as a conference, there's an absolute obligation there, I think, to make sure that you're going to not impede and help folks contact the appropriate personnel. So that's what you just saw is this one: developers, community members, attorney. It's my attempted contribution to those folks that I think at times there are folks that have a very legitimate concern over the things that go on, and I will tell you from firsthand experience back in 1999, I lived it. I had to pull somebody off, a female attendee. He was trashed. She was trashed. They were both friends of mine, but it's like, this is messed up. And I did what I thought was right and acted, I thought, the way that had to be acted, that I would act, and I would expect somebody else to act with it. I mean, that's 15 years ago. But so when folks say that bad things happen at conferences, I'm of two camps with this thing. Number one, it's not for me to say your personal experience either happened or didn't happen. The level to which your discussions on the topic, some details, other things that you provide, and your overall character are going to lend to your credibility. And it isn't just me saying that. That's the way our court system works.
Sure.
But the other thing is, it's like, I'm also like, you know what? just because people say certain things have happened, it doesn't mean that they have happened. And the one thing that I will say that disturbs me is a lot of the discussions around all of this tend to be in general terms, anonymously, very vague terms, unattributed to specific things where we as readers, we don't have a way to verify. And I think that kind of misses the mark a bit when we're trying to solve real problems. If we're trying to solve real problems, then let's focus on real problems and let's examine that.
Yeah,
and there you go.
Go ahead, Gus.
Oh, I was going to say, good point. But I just wanted to touch one piece that you just said. And how do you feel the prevalence of alcohol at conferences, pushes people into either, one, causing codes of conduct to become, or not? What's your thought there?
So it's somewhat disingenuous because I'm actually sitting here and I'm having a nip of Dalmore 12. So any Dalmore 12 fans out there,
Good choice.
Right? It's always it's a good choice and everything. And people that know me know that I am not a teetotaler by any stretch of the imagination. But I do believe that we look at things like the GitHub drink ups and these other things that go on and these sponsored alcohol type of events. Again, I think alcohol is and I'm not getting preachy here. I think it's just a fact.
I said amen, brother.
Yeah, alcohol is, if you look at a lot of the things that have happened, I think 9 times out of 10, it's safe to say that you're going to find booze, at these things. Right. And listen, I'll put all cards on the table. Folks that are watching, Gus, you know this about me, right? Typically, when I'm at a conference, I have a bottle of scotch with me. Mm-hmm. It's in the room, and we have friends, and we sit, and we tend to be away from a lot of stuff, and we're socializing, and we're drinking, and we're doing, we're having a good time, just like if I were in your house or you're in my house or whatever, and we're socializing. The fact of the matter is that there are people in our, I want to say profession, I really want to say profession, that feel that it's like they get weekend liberty and they don't know how to act, and they're drinking and they're crazy and weird stuff happens, and it's like you can't stop people from drinking, but as an I think events would be well advised to, if I'm at a venue, I'll buy my own alcohol. I don't need you to supply me with alcohol. I'm more than happy to dip into my wallet. And the thing is that, but a lot of people might not dip into their wallet. They may be too cheap to do it or whatever. And I think that, I think that the alcohol issue becomes a problem. But here is what I see as the great hypocrisy. I throw that out on Twitter. Nobody that is talking about safety of people in a venue. And by the way, I think that's beyond gender. That's for men and women. Everybody should feel safe. And the deal is, nobody wants to really take that one up. The most hardened advocates of safety at conferences, if you told them I'm going to take your booze away from you, they'd be like, well, you can't do that because nobody would show up. And I find that extremely hypocritical.
Yeah, and that's where I have to step back to KCDC really quick, because KCDC did something that I haven't really seen at many conferences, and that they actually sponsored 2 attendee parties. They had the one with the alcohol, and they had ones with Xboxes, and that was it. I mean, right. So you could choose if you wanted to step into that alcohol realm or not, right? Even if you didn't partake, you could still go. But, the people who didn't drink or choose not to drink, or, it's against their religious or personal beliefs, hopefully they went and played games, because that would have been cool. They had board games, they had PS4s, they had Xbox Ones. It was really cool.
Right.
they were able to give that to every attendee, just to make sure that they felt
Well,
good.
and one aspect of this of the social part, because with the obviously the advent of the internet and what we're doing, we're all over the country right now talking, and we're able to hook up in one place and do this. In the future, there's going to be this shift probably of less people that are actually there and more people that are casting to these kinds of events, but more specifically, the alcohol allows for the fluidity of someone's ability to communicate with other people, especially in this field of. I don't mean from the business side of the conference. I mean just as the IT guy who's going to learn about a new control or to find out about whatever the case may be, as like a thing on XPlat or Azure Backend Services, whatever. Right. And that the alcohol provides a couple of things, and it's kind of ingrained in that societal thing, like, hey, we need to maybe have a few drinks so that we can feel comfortable enough just shooting back and forth some ideas or whatever. It kind of relaxes people. So it's interesting. It's a weird line that's there, and that's always going to be there because it allows for those social barriers to be dropped a little bit. But when you drop some of those inhibitions, as alcohol does, and when you remove some of those barriers, then things can get out of control rather quickly. So it is interesting to talk about that.
It's not, and it's. We could talk about any industry. We could talk about, just college in general. We could talk about banking, insurance,
right.
pharma. We could talk about any industry where alcohol is the social lubricant, right? I mean, that's what it effectively is. And I tell you, one of my favorite shows is Mad Men. And Mad Men, because number one, the writing is just really good, but how much they nailed. So I was born in 1964. I have vague memories. My dad was in the hotel business, okay? Sure. And so that show runs from 1960. I think they're in their last season. It's like 1968, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's like I have vague memories of like about 1969, 1968, and everything. So I kind of remember, watching Neil Armstrong, when they landed on the moon, but I remember going to my dad's office. I was like five years old, and because we traveled around, and sometimes we lived in a hotel. And let me tell you guys, that was totally real in terms of you had a bar in an office. You had without telling too many tales out of school, it's like, yeah, you know what? I think I kind of understand. My dad's passed away 20 years ago, but it's like I kind of get where I think I know where he was coming from, but I think it's like, well, all that says to me is, these issues. I said before at the outset of this thing, it's like not really getting into gender bias, gender inequality, and all that stuff. But nevertheless, when we talk about codes of conduct and we talk about feeling inclusive, you can't help but getting into some of that. The show Mad Men, it's real. It's real. In terms of they were accurate. They did the research. It's like, yeah, you know what? This is not a new problem. Personal experiences. I talk to my wife all the time about dealing with what she'll deal with at her level. She's the only executive, senior vice president in her group. She's the only woman, and there's like 11 people in her group at her level as an SVP. You know what? Less than 10% on pure numbers. I'd say, you know what? There's probably a problem there. There really is a problem there.
Absolutely.
And I will just say that at the end of the day, if we could start to have a conversation around this topic, where it's not just three. We say let's just get it out there. We'll say 3 white guys of privilege in the tech industry. Let me tell you how privileged I am for a moment. I found out that I passed the bar exam on my 40th birthday, September 28th, 2004.
Congrats.
That was my 40th birthday. And let me tell you, I'm going to say it, I was scared shitless that day, where it's like I went to law school for 3 years. It comes down to whether or not I pass this, these exams or whatever, and it's like, okay, and and I passed, and I was super thrilled, and I was super happy.
Sure.
Now, meanwhile, I was already a published author, had some success as an IT person, and here I am. I have an MBA, had a bachelor's degree, and of course I have this law degree, and now I'm licensed to practice law in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And on paper, you'd say, well, that's wow, yeah, no wonder you're a white male and you've had every privilege available to you. So I went to try to get a job. In the big law firms in Philadelphia because, I had a good living as a consultant. 2 small kids at the time.
Sure.
All that. It's like I don't want to. I'm willing to take a step back, but I don't want to take too far a step back. Couldn't get a job. Good grades, great background. Why? Because I didn't fit within the parameters of somebody else's profile.
Okay.
In other words, there were other people more privileged than me.
Right. So there's always somebody. There's always somebody better.
Always somebody else.
Yep.
So, it's like, should I be complaining about that for the future? No, because it's like I can't change it. Just like, and for all those that tease me about my age and everything, I love you. It's okay. It's all cool and everything. I don't care because it is what it is. And the deal is, it's like, I can't change that. You know what? I am where I am because it's where I've decided to be. And what I can do from here on out is really, it's under my control.
Sure.
And now listen, I know that there are folks out there there are disadvantaged folks out there.
Yep.
You know what? Here's what I can do. Here's what we can all do. You can find a place to volunteer. You can provide your place to give back, and you can do your little thing. And you know what? You don't have to broadcast it. You don't have to publicize it because it's a private thing for you. But the deal is that you and Gus, so you JJ, you Gus, me, Kevin, all of us, we all have our crosses to bear. We all have the various things that we have to deal with, just like other folks have to deal with their stuff. This is my one request. We get to a conference, if there's a forum that we could have, I put out a personal invitation to the most hardened advocates of diversity, codes of conduct, whether you are straight, gay, transgender, whatever. I want to be on a panel with you to constructively talk about how we make our conference space, our conference landscape better, and how we can make things more inclusive. Because I will tell you right now, the people, and I'll rattle off, we talk about women, Deb Carrata, Jennifer Marsman, Rachel Appel, Julie Lerman, folks that I've learned a lot from.
Jennifer's great. We met her at Days.net.
It's like, and I could go on and on and on with the list, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you know what? Let's not have the private conversation. Let's have a public forum where we can talk about this. Q&A from the audience, good representative panel, good moderator, and let's start solving some problems here. And I want to be part of the solution in any way I possibly can. And that's what I got to say.
Maybe we'll look into doing that as because we can have up to, I believe, 10 people that are actively engaged on this, and maybe we'll set up a panel. I know
this scales more than Link.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Oh yeah. So we could have essentially 10 people, and then a whole nation watching the cast at one time. So if you can get the people together, we'll talk after the show, and we'll try to make that a reality. But I'll say this: the attention span of the normal human being, we've reached that crest, and it's not because I don't want to stop you talking, because everything you're saying is great information. But that is a wonderful place to kind of put a nice period at the end of this wonderful talk. So if somebody wants to be more engaged in this process, where can our audience either find you or find more information about this specific issue and all the different variations of what I just said?
So I'm not going. So the specific issue, I think you can kind of Google it, and you can find out a lot about that. For me specifically, Twitter, John V. Petersen, Petersen, on Twitter. And I try not to delve too much into it on Twitter, but because it's how much can you possibly communicate? But it happens, and one of my dear friends continually says to me he wants to punch me in the throat whenever I get involved in some of this stuff.
That's a good friend, right?
I get a throat punch warning. So, I just say to folks, it's like, look, whether it's male or female, someone that's breaking into this industry, somebody that needs your help, anything I've ever achieved in this community, in this business, is because somebody helped show me the way. Corny as it sounds, pay it forward, and yes, if there's a woman or anyone else that's somewhat underrepresented in our industry, and you think it's like you may have to bend over a little bit more backwards to help them out, you know what? Do it. Because if not you, who will? Right? Yeah. So that's all I can say on that.
Yeah. You're better for helping people, so you might as well.
In general, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. JJ.
So the next item, if you will, to kind of rush this along. I know that one thing I really wanted to get your input on real fast is the next technological niche, or what technology's coming and stuff like that. You had a wellspring, if you will, of information there. But if we could keep it just for a second and say, what do you see being? Do you see the cloud? Right, that's what the synopsis was.
Yeah. So the next big thing, and really the big thing now, it's the cloud. And the way I look at it is this way: the cloud, in my opinion, is really the killer application for mobile devices. It's the thing that really allows us to connect, I hate this phrase, the Internet of Things, but yet it does describe things pretty well. And if you go back and you look at Azure was introduced in 2010, AWS 2006. And by the way, read about AWS, because that actually was a total mistake. Somebody just totally overbought on hardware and in capacity. AWS was a total mistake in terms of the infrastructure that led to it. It's a remarkable story. 4 or 5 years. It takes about 4 or 5 years for things to shake out.
It does. Yeah.
Once upon a time, iPads, which were introduced in 2010, toys, curiosity things, playthings. Today, commonplace in the boardroom. It's been about 4 years.
Sure.
I think now that the cloud is starting to mature, and some of the regulatory issues around SOX, around HIPAA, the EU, are starting to get squared away. It becomes the most friction-free way to enable mobility. Mm-hmm. And it's so. I look at that. I look at the cloud as being the killer application for mobile devices. That's what I see in the next year, where I see in our customer base, businesses, industries. You're seeing insurance industries now that it was a per se, no frickin' way. Today,
right.
It's like they're saying, okay, it ain't a matter of if, it's now when, and how do we do it, and how do we manage it. And we as consultants provide a tremendous amount of value there. And that, in the next year, I think we're going to see the uptake, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, or whatever, we're going to see a major uptick in cloud computing.
So the next world problem we need to solve is everybody being able to have access to decent bandwidth. So with that little bit of sarcasm there.
Did you just give a prelude to net neutrality?
Maybe a little, and I'm setting up for the conversation we're going to have tomorrow night on our STL Tech Talk podcast, our weekly podcast that we have as well. We're going to be talking about some innovative things, and we're going to be talking about the recent net neutrality stuff. So it's going to be fun and lively commentary as always.
Well, hold on with that, because I want to give a quick plug to a group that I'm involved in then.
Okay.
Association for Competitive Technology, ACT Act Online, actonline.com or .org is the URL, and basically we just had a fly-in in Washington a couple of weeks ago. Miguel was there. Miguel and I were in. We spent most of the day together meeting with Senate and congressional staff. And although net neutrality was not something we were specifically dealing with on the Hill, it was something that we talked about in our pre-sessions. And the one thing I would ask all folks to do that are watching, staying informed on regulatory issues. We talk about SOPA, we talk about PIPA, we talk about all of these regulatory items with the internet. Go to ACT, check out the site, stay informed, because in our industry, there's a lot going on legally, regulatory-wise, governmental-wise, both here in the United States and also EU, that affects what we do.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So we will give a plug to that as well on the site. So for people who want more information on the show notes, we're going to have that full breakdown. Gus, why don't you go ahead and give your final thoughts and your thanks for the end of the show.
Sure. First off, John, I can't thank you enough for coming on. We were in Kansas City together. We'll be at a couple of conferences in the future again together. Can't wait to get back together with you. But special thanks, from the bottom of my heart, go to Lee, John, and Boone from KCDC. They were awesome hosts. They bent over backwards to make Kevin and I feel great, allow us to do some STL Tech Talk podcasts down there with the awesome sponsors and a few of the speakers. It couldn't have been better. I had a great time. And JJ, how about you? I know you were busy at the exact same time that we were.
I was supremely busy. In fact, I wanted to say thank you, Kevin, Gus, everybody that was a part of the interviews. It's interesting to go into a place where people actually like to talk about what they do for a living, and it's so awesome to hear from all of you guys. So thank you to KCDC again from me. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I'll be there next year. I want to thank the St. Louis Microsoft Store and the St. Louis Galleria for allowing us to shoot a live recording of the STL Tech Talk podcast. I want to thank them for their support. that they've thrown behind us when we're trying to do pretty much anything with our Windows Phone user groups, with our BizSpark and DreamSpark, and getting people engaged in technology and reaching out to the youth and reaching out to businesses. I can't thank you enough for letting me cover Small Business Week. I literally was there as long as their regular employees were. They just started. They're like, hey, do you want a shirt? Do you just want to work here? I gave 2 presentations, and I couldn't have had a better time, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without people that cared enough about small business to make us better. So shout outs go to Carson, to Trina, and everybody that made that possible. I can't thank you enough for that as well. And thank you, Alejandro, a new member of our team, for everything that he helped me with to cover the event. And I hope all of you have a chance to not only watch our show, but look over that event coverage and just kind of see all the different stuff and all the different people that we came across. It's amazing. The small business community really needs to be talked to about the future of their business and how it molds with technology and how they shouldn't be left behind. They don't have to be. They can talk with people who are engaged. And that was just so much fun to be a part of that process. And thank you to everybody that helped me get through last week's finals and everything like that. So just a big thank yous go out to everybody. Again, John, thank you so much for being on the show. We can't thank you enough. Gus, was there anything else you wanted to say?
Nope, that's
I got one thing. I got one thing I got to do, because one of your first guests, Miguel Castro, is still so I want to give a shout out to Miguel real quick, because this is the Drew Estate Acid Cuba Grande, and Miguel turned me on to these things a few weeks ago when we were in Washington. So of all the things that I am thankful for, this is an excellent cigar, and Miguel, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for turning me on to the Cuba Grande. It is frickin' awesome. There you go.
Don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't drink, and stay in school, kids. So, John, thank you so much for being on the show. We can't thank you enough for being on the show. We will have you back on again in the future. So I hope you had a great time. And to all of our fans, we love and thank you for all your support of the show. So from the entire STL Tech Talk crew, if you like watching Battlestar Galactica, you'll like this saying, crew, good coding. We're out.